call and the recording, it goes up. Okay, Boker Tov. We're here at Matan. Purim Sameach, everybody. We're going to study today in our Matan Yom Yun Purim and the celebration of human crisis. Purim and the celebration of human crisis. Let's think about this word for a second, crisis. Good word or bad word? Good word or bad word? In 1959, JFK, former US president, he's quoted as follows in the following speech. When written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One means danger, and the other means opportunity. Okay? It's a very interesting read. Now, it happens to be that he's incorrect in terms of Chinese, but it doesn't matter, okay? Opportunity, I mean, this notion of crisis can have a double meaning. If we think about, hunger crisis, good or bad? Bad. Crisis in Ukraine, good or bad? Bad. Okay. There we could go through the pandemic, COVID crisis, bad. But let's throw out a few more terms. What about a midlife crisis? Is a midlife crisis a good thing or a bad thing?
Depends on your age.
It's both. What do you mean it depends? What do you mean? What? Give me an example of a good midlife crisis.
A midlife crisis can move you to do something that otherwise you wouldn't have done. So that's
okay.
Good.
So it could be good,
so to speak.
Okay. It could also be wasteful if you buy that Porsche and you can't pay your bills, and that's a bit of a problem. Or it might lead to other behavior as well. Any other examples of a crisis that that might be good?
Well, obviously, outpouring of giving.
Sometimes a crisis can lead to something that's good. That's correct. Your tragedy leads to giving. Say again.
Medical crisis.
Medical crisis that makes you change your life, and ultimately you maybe take on better habits, better ways of living, and you extend your life in a way that you wouldn't have known otherwise.
But it's the outcome of the crisis. It's not the crisis itself.
It's not. You're saying the crisis itself is always bad, but sometimes the outcome can be good. Is there any example where a crisis itself is good, where the experience of the crisis is good?
In Ukraine now, a lot of people are coming here.
Okay, so but that's an outcome. It's an outcome, and we want them to come, of course. We want them to come with their belongings and with their suitcases and with their families and good health and safety, and not have to come, running away from Russian missiles. 1948. Okay, that was a crisis of sorts. Okay, war at Mohammed Atzmaut, but it was a crisis that was definitely a good one. What about a religious crisis or an existential crisis? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What was there a question? What about a religious crisis? Is that a good thing? Is someone speaking from the heavens? Who is this?
Yes.
I thought that, yeah.
Crisis of faith.
A crisis of faith. Is a crisis of faith a good thing or a bad thing?
It means that you're looking seriously at things.
So you're saying it's a good thing. Interesting. Okay, is that Don? Is that?
Yes.
Okay, look at that. Yafeh. Okay. You can see and I can't. You guys can make faces on your screen and I can't. Corona brought the Zoom. The Zoom is here. That's right. So what we're going to explore today is the meaning of crisis, and actually, in fact, the celebration of crisis in light of Purim. And my goal is to help elucidate a deeper understanding of what Purim is about. When we think of Purim, we think about merrymaking, we think about drinking and feasting, mishloach manot, matanot la'yamim. I want to make the case that Purim is actually much deeper. It has a dual aspect to it. It's in fact more complicated. And if we miss this part of Purim, it's possible that we haven't really understood what Purim is about. Let's deepen our understanding of Chag Purim. Okay, now just one more question. How many days is Purim? You just gave two answers. Pick one. Is Purim 1 day or 2 days? 2 days. Well, Reba, how long is Purim?
Okay, it depends where you are.
It depends where you are. Okay, so you're saying it's 1 day in Ra'anana, it's 1 day in Yerushalayim. Okay, so you're not going to Purim Shulash.
Different states
Where does it say that it's 2 days? I mean, you mean saying in Yerushalayim, it depends on whether you're in a walled city or not. If you're in a walled city or a city that was walled during the time of Yeshua ben Nun, so you keep the 15th of the month. Okay, so we're gonna talk about this. How many? We can't even agree on how many days per. Oh, what is this world coming to? You know, should I wear a mask? Should I not wear a mask? Now we're even confused about whether Purim is 1 or 2 days. Okay, let's understand. Let's start from the beginning. Ta'anit Esther. Tomorrow is a fast day. Okay, make sure to eat and drink a lot. Not too much coffee. And make sure to eat and drink a lot today. Okay. Tomorrow is a fast day. Why are we fasting on Ta'anit Esther tomorrow? What does it commemorate? What does Ta'anit Esther commemorate? Tomorrow is the 13th of Adar, Yud Gimel Adar. What? That Esther asked the people to fast. Okay, good. Esther asked the people to fast. Let's work in that direction. Sorry, right? Let's work in that direction. Esther asked the people to fast. How many days did she ask them to fast for?
3 days.
3 days. Okay, who wants to fast now for 3 days? Anybody interested in the 3-day fast? No? No drinking, no eating, just like Esther did in the Megillah. Who's up for it? No? No one wants to do a 3-day fast. So why are we fasting 1 day tomorrow to commemorate a 3-day fast of Esther? Huh? We're fasting for the fighting. Okay, good. Good. What's your name? Rivka. Okay, so good. Yafem. So now we're understanding that we don't understand Ta'anit Esther, because if you look at the first few sources here, let's just get the dates right. When did Haman decree? When did he do his goral, his pur, like he did his lottery? When did that happen? That happened. It says here in the first source here, Esther Perek Gimel, Vayikaru Sofrei HaMelech b'chodesh harishon b'shlosha asar yom. It's around the 13th of Nisan. The first month is Nisan. 13th of Nisan, Haman does his whole goral, and they send out messages to the whole kingdom. 1st of Nisan. And what day does it fall on, though? What day is the day that they're going to destroy the Jewish people? Yud Gimel Ba'adar. As you look at the end of this pasuk, Yud Gimel, in the bold-faced words, Bishlosha asar l'chodesh, shneim asar hu chodesh Adar. The 13th of the 12th month. What's the 12th month in the Jewish calendar? Adar. So he does his goral, his lottery, in the beginning of the year, the 13th of Nisan. And then, but it falls out basically 12 months later, the 13th of Adar. So the Jews have 12 months to plan, essentially. Okay? Now, after the message gets sent out, what happens? What does Mordechai do? Mordechai yadat kol asher na'asa vayikra Mordechai et bigadav vayilbash sak. There he goes, and he starts rendering his garments and mourning in the streets of Shushan. And what does Esther say to him? Get dressed. Stop embarrassing me, Uncle. Stop embarrassing me. You look terrible. Like, what are you doing? Why are you acting this way? And they have this back and forth. And Mordechai warns her. And he says, "Listen. The reason you were chosen now is to save the Jewish people." What does Esther then do? She says, "Lech kenos et kol haYehudim hanimtzeim b'Shushan v'tzumu alai v'al tochelu v'al tishtu shloshet yamim laila vayom." So she says, "Listen, we're going to have a fasting. We're going to have 3 days of fasting here in Shushan. No eating and no drinking." When did these 3 days fall out?
A year later.
No, not a year later. No.
Oh,
When they done, it's
Pesach.
5. But when did they fall out? They fall out basically on Pesach. The Jews are fasting on Pesach. It's one way to get out of not eating matzah. Okay, if matzah does bad things for your system, so you could fast like Esther did. Yeah.
Don't I recall the fasting were originally 3 days, not 1?
You mean in general fast days? Not that I know of. I think they're always 1 day. But this one was originally 3 days. 3 days. Okay, 3 days. In the month of Nisan, not in the month of Adar, not the day before Purim, in the month of Nisan. Based on this, it would appear that Ta'anit Esther doesn't really make sense why it falls out the day before Purim. Why is it falling out tomorrow? It doesn't make sense. So what I want to share with you is 3 different explanations of what Ta'anit Esther is. and why it falls out the day before Purim. We're going to look at three classical sources here. I number them number 1, 2, and 3. The first is quoted in the Beit Yosef. And he quotes an Italian commentator by the name of the Shibole Haleket, who quotes Rashi. Katuv b'shibole haleket matzati b'shem Rashi. I found in the name of Rashi, there is a certain story. And what's a story of a woman who needs to go and visit some government official on the day of Tanit Esther? She wants to know, can she push back Tanit Esther to being earlier in the week? And basically, how did Rashi respond? If you go to the second line and the end of the line, Amar Rabbeinu, Ta'anit ze eino lo midivrei Torah v'lo midivrei sofrim ela minhag be'alma sheharei Tanit Esther and Mordechai yu b'mei Pesach. The first explanation of Rashi in the Shibbolei Halakha is that Tanit Esther is actually a very lenient fast. It's a minhag. It's a custom. Okay, it's a custom. And why do they make it the day before Purim? Listen, Mordechai and Esther fasted during Pesach. We're not going to do that. We're not going to reenact that. So we add on to the day before Purim a fast day, just like Mordechai and Esther, but it's not so serious. Don't take it so seriously. Not such a big deal. Okay, that's the first explanation of the Beit Yosef. Second explanation of Masachet Sofrim, which is it sort of builds upon the Beit Yosef, is as follows: Minhag Rabotenu Shebim Ma'arav, our custom in the West, Lihitanot Shlosha Yemei Tzom Mordechai ve'Esther Prudot. They don't keep Tanit Esther. You know what they do? 3 days of fasting, separated. Okay. Sounds like a good way to diet, if you ask me, right? And especially after Purim. So Purim's going to be on a Thursday. So the next Monday, Thursday, Monday, you fast after Purim, not before Purim, after Purim. And why 3 days? To remember what Esther did for 3 days. Okay. And if you look in the Shulchan Aruch right below that, there's a sort of a piece of that idea is mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. Some have the custom of fasting 3 days for Tanit Esther. We don't follow this practically, but it's based on this position in the Masachet Sofrim. So this is the second explanation for Tanit Esther. Again, it's after Purim. It's 3 days. It's split up, and it's still not during the time when Mordechai and Esther actually fasted. Now we get to the third explanation of the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher. And we're collecting evidence here. This Rabbeinu Asher is going to be an important piece of evidence. We're going to build up this evidence to come to a new understanding of Tanit Esther and ultimately Purim. Let's look at the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher. Upiresh Rabbeinu Tam. It says number 3. Piresh Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam is the grandson of, anybody know? Grandson of Rashi. Okay, he wasn't born, Tam. His parents didn't call him Tam when he came out of the womb. Okay, his name was Yaakov. Okay, and he was studying Torah. He was such a great sage, so they gave him the same nickname as Yaakov Avinu, who was an Ish Tam Yoshev Alim. So Rabbeinu Yaakov, Rabbeinu Tam. He says, Man ki'ila lekolhi. He says, you know what the 13th day of Adar is? It's a day of gathering together. Zman kihila. Shehakol mitasvin Tanit Esther. Everyone comes together. Ubnei hakfarim arayot. All the villagers come to the city. Lomar slichot v'tachanunim. To say slichot and tachanunim. Does that sound like a sad day or a happy day? Really sad day. When else do we say slichot and tachanunim? Okay, before Rosh Hashanah we say slichot. Nachon, when do we say tachanunim? When do we say these things on other fast days? Other fast days. Lefi shabo nikalu la'amor al nafsham. On that day, the Jewish people stood up for themselves. V'hayut tzrichim rachamim, and we needed divine compassion. V'chein matzina b'Moshe. There's an earlier example of this. Moshe Rabbeinu she'asa ta'anit kishenilcham ba'Amalek. When he fought against Amalek, guess what Moshe did? Okay, I remember watching a video about D-Day. Okay, video about anyone see World War II in color? Documentary on Netflix? No, what are you watching on Netflix? What are you watching, like Glee and I don't know, what do you watch? Seinfeld. Okay, you get a pass, but that's it. Everyone else, what stuff are you watching? World War II in color. Go home and just binge the rest of the day watching World War II in color. It is unbelievable. I'll tell you what I remember from the D-Day. It's like a 12-part series. So the American soldiers, the GIs, kept trying to figure out when they were going to actually go and attack France. Like when were they going to actually, land in Normandy? And they said whenever they would give us a big breakfast, that's when we knew that, it was a battle day. They'd give us steak and eggs, and they would fill us up with a really big meal. And that's when they knew that it was time to attack. Moshe Rabbeinu does the opposite. Instead of bacon and eggs for the morning of a war, a battle, you know what Moshe does? He says, we're going to go daven a little bit more. We're going to have extra tehillim. Extra tehillim, and we're not going to eat anything. Moshe and Aaron, they go up, and this symbolizes that they had a fast day prior to their battle. Mikan nir'eh Rabbeinu Tam sa'ad l'Tanit Esther. Shanu osim kemo she'asa b'mei Mordechai ve'Esther kishenikalu hayudim lamor nafsham. This is the basis for Tanit Esther. It's not because of Esther's 3 days. It has nothing to do with Esther's 3 days of fasting before she goes to see the king. It has to do with the day that the Jewish people stood up and fought back against their enemies. And you know what they needed to do? They needed rachamim. They needed divine compassion. So they had a ta'anit. They had a fast day. So we're remembering their fighting and their davening the day prior to, the day of the battle. Okay. And that's why we keep ta'anit Esther. So, yeah.
We also have this part about having that time with, on the fast day, we don't eat, don't drink, we don't celebrate. And then the next day, not full food.
Okay, we're going to talk about that. Now that we understand the basis for Ta'anit Esther, and I want to work within the framework of Rabbeinu Tam, okay? The most compelling explanation here. How is Ta'anit Esther different than other fast days? So I'll give you a few examples of how this is different. Can anyone think of some differences? Anybody? Let me give a good example. The next day we celebrate right away. It's sort of like Tisha B'Av. Everybody's got a barbecue, the day after Tisha B'Av, as if there's some halachic obligation to eat steak the day after the 9 days. It's very interesting. But but that might not be such a good habit. But how is Ta'anit Esther different than other fast days? Anybody know? Okay, we have a party the next day. Okay, so we end it with a party. Okay, that's true. There's certainly the case. We don't end Shiva Asar B'Tammuz with a party. Okay, we don't end it with a party. But we just eat food, but we don't end it with a party. Okay, what might be some differences? Yeah. Okay, so you don't need to wear leather shoes, for example. Okay, it's more lenient in terms of the fast day. Okay, so for example, if you look at the Shulchan Aruch, okay, this is the second source under how is Ta'anit Esther different. So he says, if you just go a few words in Haggah, the Ta'anit ze eino chova. He even says it's not even an outright obligation. It means that you could be lenient in certain instances. If someone's nursing or pregnant, I won't ask if there's anyone in the room who's someone who's sick, you could be lenient in these circumstances. You have to fast on Ta'anit Esther, but if someone's sick, someone has a medical emergency, you could be a little bit more lenient. Even if your eye hurts, you have a lot of pain, discomfort, you don't have to fast. That's the first difference between Ta'anit Esther and other fast days. We're more lenient about it. It's an obligation, but we break the obligation in case of need. Yes.
So this is, you're fasting for something that's going to be happening rather than something that's actually happening on that day. So
in what sense? What do you mean?
Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, it's that day.
Yeah.
Tisha B'Av, it's that day.
Correct.
Sukkot, it's that day. Some Gedalia, it's that day. Purim, Ta'anit Esther, is for the next day.
You're fasting for, what do you mean you're fasting for the next day?
You're fasting for the fact that the Jews stood up for themselves the next day, for the actual battle. This is a
Okay, so no, they stood up on that day, on Yud Gimel. Yud Dalet is when they celebrated. And then Tedvav, remember in Shushan, they add another day of battle. So they fight in Shushan on the 13th and the 14th, then celebrate on the 15th. So 13 is a day of battle. Tanit Esther is a day of battle, according to Rabbeinu Tam. Just to get the dates right. So I hear what you're saying, but you're onto something. What's your name?
Debbie.
Huh?
Debbie.
Debbie's onto something. Tanit Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is commemorating a certain event, a tragic event. Asara B'Tevet is commemorating a tragic event, right? Tisha B'Av is commemorating a certain tragic event. This does not appear to be commemorating a tragic event. Okay, it's celebrating what will lead to good, what will lead to a positive event. Okay, now if you notice, look at the source right before that. Talmud Bavli Masechet Tanit Daf Kav Amud Aleph. We have a list of the ta'aniyot, of the things, the fast days in Jewish history, in the Jewish calendar. Okay, Chamisha Dvarim Iru et Avotenu b'Shiva Asar b'Tammuz, v'Chamisha b'Tisha B'Av b'Shiva Asar b'Tammuz. Guess what's missing from this list of fast days? Ta'anit Esther is not listed amongst the fast days. How many fast days do we have in the Jewish calendar? Just go through it quickly. We have Tzom Gedalia, number 1. What else? In the winter. Okay, no, but Yom Kippur is like a religious fast. In terms of tragedy fast days. Tzom Gedalia. Gedalia is killed. Asara b'Tevet. Before Tisha B'Av. Shiva Asar b'Tammuz, number 3, and Tisha B'Av. 4 tragic fast days in the Jewish calendar. Okay, 4 tragic fast days. Within that list, Ta'anit Esther is not mentioned. It doesn't make the list. Why is that? Okay, so this is a second way in which it's different. If you look in the Rambam, Hilchot Ta'aniyot, Perike. Let's read the words, the golden words of the Rambam very carefully. Very carefully. Yesh Sham Yamim Shekol Yisrael Mitanim. Bottom of page 1. Behem Ipnei Hatzarot She'iru Bahen. There are days that we fast because of the tzara. What's tzara? What's tzara, nu? The troubles, the sorrows, the tragedies. Kedei le'orer halevavot v'liftoach darchei hatshuva. To awaken our hearts, to open up the path of tshuva. V'yezeh zikaron ma'aseinu hara'im. It reminds us of our terrible deeds. Ve'eluhen. And this is the list. Yom Shlishi b'Tishrei, v'Asri b'Tevet, v'Shiva Asar v'Tisha B'Av. Again, the 4 tragic days. What's missing from the Rambam's list? Ta'anit Esther is not mentioned here. And he goes on. V'Arbat Yemei Atzomot Eilu Hareim Mefurashim b'Kabbalah. These are all mentioned in the Tanakh. Anybody know where they're mentioned in Tanakh? Look at the next word in the Rambam. Zechariah Perek Chet. Zechariah is in Navi during which temple? First or second? Second temple. And look what Zechariah says. Tzom HaRevi'i, Tzom HaChamishi, Tzom HaShivi'i, Tzom HaAsiri. Okay, these are the 4 fast days, depending on the month of the year. Okay, we're not going to go through exactly how they correspond. Okay, what does Zechariah, by the way, say about them? You know what he says about them? Yihiyu l'sason v'lesimcha. These 4 fast days in Messianic times will become days of celebration. Okay? 4 tragic fast days turn into days of celebration. That's with regards to the first 4 fast days. They're about sarah, they're about distress and tragedy. Let's go to the 5th halacha. I skipped down. Halacha hey. Took out some lines here. V'nahagu kol Yisrael bizmanim elu litanot b'shlosha asar ba'adar zecher l'ta'anit sheitanu b'mei haman. He says, listen, and the Jewish people have a custom to also fast on the 13th of Adar. But notice how the Rambam codifies this. It's separate and distinct from the other list. When the Rambam does that, it's significant. We have to pay attention to that. Okay, let's go to the next page. Page 2. Gathering together all of our evidence. We're going to summarize it in just a second. Let's see one other difference that also is pointed out in the Rambam here. So in this next halacha, the Rambam says, and I just quoted this outside, that all of these tragic fast days will turn into days of they'll be nullified in the Messianic times. they'll turn into days of celebration. Tisha B'Av is going to be the biggest party. Okay, Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, we're all going to go to Eilat. I don't know, Asara B'Tevel. It's going to be an amazing celebration. Okay, national holidays. We'll finally get a day off in this country. Okay, the only time we get off is when there are elections. Okay, so we haven't had elections in a little bit, so maybe we're Sunday's not happening. I know this is an annual crowd, and like all the people in the country who have voted for Sunday as a day off are all sitting in this room. Okay, so we're all here, but we have to give up on that option. It's not going to happen. I think the next best bet is to turn the fast days into days of celebration. There'll be national holidays. Everybody could have an ala eish. Okay, you could sit in traffic for 3 hours, going to see your grandchildren. It'll be wonderful. It'll be a wonderful day. Okay, we just need to pray for Mashiach to come. We just need that like one piece, and we're there. Okay, but these 4 tragic days are going to become celebrations. What's not in this list? Ta'anit Esther. Ta'anit Esther is not counted among the original list. It's not included amongst the other tzomot. It also will not turn into a day of celebration. It's going to remain as it is. That's really interesting. Why is that? Why is that? Okay, let's look at one final piece here before we bring this all together. The run on the Rif, okay? The run is, these are like people, by the way. Okay, my 9th grade Rebbe, Rabbi Shlomo Kovitz, he should live and be well. I hope he's still alive. He used to say, we used to say, the run, stop running around whenever we would learn to run. And stop with this riff-raff when we would learn a piece in the riff. So now we have a run on the riff. Okay, aval haravid. I don't have a good word for the rivid. I don't know. If anyone has a good pun for the rivid, you let me know. So the rivid, again, he wasn't born this way. No one names their kid rivid when they're born in the hospital. Okay, you name Rav Avraham Bendavid. Okay, he was from southern France and Provence. Aval rivid zalomer. Okay, skip to the dots. Elishahu zal katav. The Yud Gimel eino domer l'sha'ar Ta'anit. The fast of Esther is not like the other fasts. Okay, and we've been building up to this point. Why? The zikaron hu l'neis shena'asabo. What does that mean? The zikaron hu l'neis shena'asabo. No, what does that mean? It's a what is it? It's a remembrance of the miracle that happened. What do we do when we remember the miracle of Yetziat Mitzrayim? Somebody tell me. We celebrate like feast, like kings. What do we do to celebrate other miracles? A person has a Sudat Hodaya, right? You have a day of celebration of a personal miracle that happened to you. You throw a feast, you have Divrei Torah, celebration, family, friends. This is how we're going to celebrate a feast, by fasting. Anybody want to come to a party where they're going to fast? It's like, thanks for the invitation. It's so wonderful to see you. Let's daven together. What a fun party. It's a remembrance of the miracle that happened on that day. How do we understand this idea? Quoted by the Ravid. What does that mean that it's remembrance? I was fasting or what's going on here? So we have a number of different, let's just pull together all of our evidence before we present the theory. Okay? We have the following things. Number one, Ta'anit Esther is not based on Esther and Mordechai's fast. It's based on when the Jewish people stood up to fight on Yud Gimel Adar. Okay, and they actually fasted that day instead of having bacon and eggs. Okay, that's number one. Okay, number two, this is not listed in amongst the 4 tzomot, the 4 fast days of tragedy listed in Sefer Zechariah. Number 3, not only is it not listed as days of tragedy, it's not listed as it's not going to become a day of celebration via Yemot HaMashiach either. Number 4, more lenient about the fast. Okay, we spoke about some of the leniencies in terms of the halachot. And number 5, the Rif, the Ravid quoted in the Ran and the Rif says, "The zikaron hu l'nei asebo." It's a remembrance of the miracle that happened on that day. Again, we remember this in a strange way by fasting. So, what is the deal with Ta'anit Esther? And I hope that by understanding Ta'anit Esther, we'll understand Purim in a deeper way as well. So we're going to turn now to Rav Soloveitchik's understanding of Ta'anit Esther. And we're going to preface it with a very famous Gemara. We're going to read this Gemara, and that's going to help us to fill in the whole picture. Okay, this is a Gemara. Anyone here study Daf Yomi? Anyone doing Daf Yomi? Anyone? Yeah, okay, yeah. We just did this in Masechet Megillah, right? Daf Dalet and Masechet Megillah. So skip down a little bit to Talmud Bavli Masechet Megillah Daf Dalet Amud Aleph. Okay. You see, I put 4 lines there. This is the source for reading the Megillah, not once on Purim, but twice.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. Do we take our lulav twice on every day of Sukkot? Do we blow the shofar twice? Oh, we blow it one time. Do we blow the shofar throughout Tefillah? Do we blow it again at the end of the day or the night before on Rosh Hashanah? Should we do a mitzvah once? We fulfill the mitzvah, and we move on. Why do we read the Megillah at night and also during the morning? Okay, so let's read inside. The Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. I heard someone once say, it says, the chances of you being drunk at one of the readings is very high. So at least at the second reading, you'll be sober. Okay, but that's not quoted in the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Chayav adam likra Megillah b'layla v'lishnota v'yom. A person needs to read the Megillah at night. V'lishnota. What does v'lishnota mean? You have to read it like sheni. Read it a second time. Any other source for lishnota? Can you think of a biblical word that sounds like lishnota? Lishinantam devanach, which means to what? To repeat. Okay. Teach your children well. Repeat. You have to repeat the teaching. Okay. Ashana Amar Elohai Ekra. We bring a pasuk. Elohai, my God. Ekra Yomam. I called out during the day. Velo ta'aneh, and you didn't answer. V'layla velo dumi ali. And at night I am not silent, meaning I continue to call out. So why are we bringing this pasuk? There's a pasuk from Sefer Tehillim. Why would we bring this pasuk to prove that you need to read the Megillah twice? What is this pasuk about? It's not about Esther. What is this pasuk about? I mean, it may be indirect, but what is this pasuk about? And it's pshat. What is this pasuk about?
Night and day.
What?
Night and day.
What about night and day? A lot of things happen night and day, but what is this? What?
Not being answered.
Not being answered, but what are we doing? What are we doing? We are
Praying. We are praying again.
We're pleading with Hashem. We're calling out to Hashem night and day. How does that have to do with Megillat Esther? Doesn't seem to be connected. Keep reading number 2. Savur mina. When the students heard this explanation of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, they thought it meant as follows. They thought, you know what we're going to do? You read the Megillah at night and you learn the Mishnayot of Masechet Megillah in the morning. Okay? That would be an interesting custom. Okay? Amar Lahu Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah responded, Rabbi Yirmiyah said, no, I understand this differently. It's that you're reading the Megillah twice. You read it once, and you read it the second time during the day. And that's the basis for our custom of reading the Megillah at night and during the day. Itmar Nami, another statement and final statement in our Gemara. Amar Rabbi Chelbo Amar Ula Bira. You have to read the Megillah at night and during the day. And what's the next thing that he quotes? Shine Amar Lema'an Yizamercha Kavod V'lo Yidom Hashem Elokai Le'olam Odeka. Anyone recognize this pasuk? No? What's this from? It's from a parak of Tehillim that we say on it, that we should say on a daily basis. What parak is it? Mizmor Shir Chanukata Bait LeDavid, right? But notice he's saying the same thing as Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. You have to read the Megillah twice, repeat it during the day, but he quotes a different pasuk. What's this pasuk? Shnei Amar, it says, "L'ma'an yizamercha kavod." In order that I should praise your honor, okay, David is speaking to Hashem. V'lo yidom, I will not be silent. Hashem lokai le'olam odeka. Hashem, I will continue to praise you. Again, we see repetition. I will do something once, I will do it again. What type of tefillah? What's going on here? What's David HaMelech doing here? He's praising Hashem, right? Shevach v'hoda'ah. What's the pasuk that we had in the beginning? What was that? Elokai ekra yomam v'lo ta'aneh. What type of tefillah is that? Pleading. So 2 psukim, both related to tefillah, are brought as proof that you need to read the Megillah twice. What does the Megillah have anything to do with Megillah? How are these two things connected? Let's read Rav Soloveitchik, Days of Deliverance. What is the Megillah? According to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Megillah is a book of human sorrow and misery, the cry of the lonely person to the Almighty. According to Ula, the Megillah, this is the second opinion, right? Ula Bira. The Megillah is a jubilant song of thanksgiving and praise of a person cured and redeemed by the Almighty. Which one is the correct understanding? Rav Soloveitchik is taking these two comments, these two halachic statements by Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Ula, and saying they are explicating two different understandings of the Megillah. And they quote different psukim. The Megillah is a book of human sorrow and misery. On the other hand, the Megillah is a call of thanksgiving. Which one is the correct understanding? The answer is simple. Both characterizations are correct. The Megillah contains two stories. The story of human happiness and fulfillment, La Yehudim, Haitara, V'simcha, V'sason, Bikar, as well as the story of human misery and distress. The reading of the Megillah is a dialectical performance, meaning it goes back and forth. Okay, it's like a pendulum, it swings. Consequently, the whole character of Purim changes. It is not just as people assume a day of hilarious feasting, drinking, and merrymaking. Purim is also a day of meditation. Not meditation like, Pilates and yoga. Okay? I don't think he means meditations like that. But you understand, introspection and serious self-examination. No wonder that some Geonim advise that the Tachanun prayer be recited on Purim. There's an opinion that you say Tachanun on Purim. Imagine if we were to do that at shul. There would be a rebellion. People would be attacking the rabbi. Oh my God, you're saying Tachanun and Purim. I came to shul so that we don't say Tachanun today. Okay? Okay, because Purim is a day of supplication and petition. But the Geonim said that you should actually say Tachanun on Purim day itself. As a matter of fact, the whole institution of the fast of Esther rests upon this very dichotomy inherent in the festival of Purim, upon the paradoxical halachic requirement that Purim be observed both as a day of prayer and as a day of joyous celebration. Since it is impossible to comply with this paradoxical requirement, how do you join prayer and celebration in one day of experience? It's too much to squeeze in. So guess what the rabbis decided to do? They decided to make not one, but 2 days of Purim. Purim is 2 days. That's your answer. Purim is 2 days. In Yerushalayim, it's 2 days. Just on the second day is a different day. Okay, it's 2 days. Since it is impossible to comply with this paradoxical requirement, the rabbis advanced the observance of the prayer aspect of Purim to the 13th of Adar. The fast of Esther is not to be treated as an extraneous addendum to the Purim. It is a genuine Purim day. What is Rav Soloveitchik saying? Rav Soloveitchik is saying is that Purim is not 1 day, it's 2 days. Ta'anit Esther is not like some addendum or some extraneous appendage to Purim. It is integral to the Purim celebration. Purim is 2 days. There are two aspects to Purim. One part of Purim is a day of fasting, of meditation, of introspection, of davening. And the next day is a day of feasting and celebration, but they go together. They're attached. They're attached at the hip. They are part of the same Chag of Purim. And they're captured in these two opinions of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who connects Purim to davening Elokai Ekrav V'lo Taneh V'layla V'adum Li'ali. And the second corresponds to Ula. The second part of Purim is the day of the Mani Zamerecha Kavod V'lo Yidom Hashem Elokai Le'olam Odek. Now, what Rav Soloveitchik is going to do is he's going to say this. This dual experience of Purim, this is really just a commentary on our own lives, right? It's a commentary on our own lives. In our own lives, thank God, we have much to celebrate. Family and friends, especially now that, please God, we're getting out of COVID, hopefully for the time being, right? Many good things to celebrate. But we also know that the good things can sometimes disappear really quickly. And you can go from good to bad just like that. And chas v'shalom, there could be a tragedy. It could be the stock market crashed. There are things that can happen and things that the pendulum can shift 100%. 100%. Okay, we don't need to go through a list of things that can happen, chas v'shalom, to a family or to a person, but we know that life has these and then it can swing back. It can swing back. Okay, you could have a bris, for a granddaughter, and chas v'shalom, the person loses a parent in the same. Like these things happen. These things happen, unfortunately. So the pendulum swings back and forth between thanksgiving and petition and prayer, and this is part of our human experience. And that's what the Rav is saying, that Purim is a commentary on our lives. In what metaphysical phenomenon is the dialectical aspect of Purim found? It is found in the human experience. Man is a frightened being, not in the psychological sense, but in the ontological and metaphysical sense. What he's saying is that thinking about our mortality. Man is a creature full of anxiety, right? Anxiety. We've all had a lot of anxiety these last 2 years, and you had it before that as well. Who experiences the realities of memory and anticipation. The reality of anticipation as man looking towards the future, his uncertainty breeding from what's going to be. Am I going to get on the flight? Are they going to cancel my flight? Do I have to take a COVID test? Do I have to take a COVID test? Okay, there's a lot of, am I going to be able to be at the simcha? Do we have to change the date of the simcha of the wedding? It's a lot. The reality of anticipation leaves man in a constant state of need. The uncertainty inherent in the human experience is reflected even in the prayer of thanksgiving, Hallel. Hallel, which is not just a song of praise. Hallel is comprised of a glorious praise for God, as reflected by Psalm 114. The Psalm of praise, Almighty, for redeeming Israel from Egypt. Yet Hallel also includes fervent petitioning for divine benevolence and protection, as reflected in the cry of Ana Hashem Oshiana. We go from Ana Hashem Oshiana to think about the sequence of events in Hallel. We say, this is a wondrous day. Ana Hashem Oshiana, God save us. And then what's the next thing? We move to Holy Hashem Kitov again. We go back. It's the pendulum of life. Similarly, Purim is also dual in character. Yeah.
Yet Hallel is not said.
Say again. Hallel is not said on Purim. Correct. It's a whole other piece there. The miracle of a doomed people being saved merited song and praise. However, prayer and petitions were also in order, since circumstances can change quickly. Achashverosh was liable to do away with Esther, as he did with Vashti. The duality of Purim is based then on man's vulnerability. Vulnerability of man, and I should add here in Matan, or of woman, is not simply a tragic truth, but rather an ethical postulate, meaning it leads to certain behavior. It should lead to certain behavior. It gives rise to modesty and humility in man. How can a man rich in accomplishments and successful in all endeavors be expected to be humble? How can he suppress his arrogance towards those who have failed in life? The answer lies in man's vulnerability to change. Suddenly, without reason, a man can be cast down from the throne of success to the pit of despair. Man's vulnerability serves as a cathartic and ennobling factor. Humility, then, is the expression of man's awareness of his vulnerability. And so Purim, so let's go back. If you just go back for a second, I sort of summarize this on page 2, the Rav's view of this, Rav Soloveitchik and Tanit Esther. Tanit Esther is not a day of remembering tsarot like the other fast days. We're not commemorating a tragic event. Which may also explain why we're a little bit more lenient in terms of the fasting, the halachot of fasting itself. Tanit Esther is an integral part of Purim. It is day 1 of a 2-day holiday. Together, Tanit Esther and Purim Day provide a framework for confronting life's challenges. Purim lo yibatel olam. Now let's get to this third point. Purim is the one fact that the Rambam quotes, and it's based on the Gemara, shelo yibatel le'olam. It will continue to exist for all time. I want to make the case that this framework of Tanit Esther and Purim, the two things side by side, provide for us an approach to the world, an approach to reality, an approach to our lives that we need to have with us, not just on Purim Day, but moving forward from Purim. Purim captures what happens in a time of no nivuah. It's the last of it's the last book in Tanakh, and it captures the current period that we live in Jewish history. There are no outright miracles. There are no prophets. Okay, God feels hidden and He is concealed. He is Anochi Aster Aster Panay Mahem, like He is hidden in Megillat Esther, but working behind the scenes. That's the world that we live in. We live in a world of Mordechai and Esther and Shushan Hazira and Achashverosh and Haman, and that's the world that we live in today. Okay, and Megillat Esther provides us with a framework for how to deal with reality. And what we see here is that we need to hold both of these human experiences together at the same time. And what are they? A feeling of thanksgiving when things are good. For the moments that are good, they could be small moments, they could be big events, right? Sitting with, I was holding my son, Adir, last night. He's a little bit sick, he's got a little cold, so he was like extra cuddly. He just wanted to, I was out in Yerushalayim, well, I got home late, and just to hold him for a few minutes this is heaven, right? This is divine. These need to be turned and transformed into moments of thanksgiving. Because they're fleeting, because the next moment, two of my sons were crying and screaming, so I guess these things are fleeting, you understand. And so we have to hold on to these moments of thanksgiving. And that's one aspect of Purim, of feasting, and giving of ourselves to others, matanot levyonim, mishloach mano, welcoming people for a su'udah, sharing whatever we have with others. That's one part of the human experience that we need to embrace and invest in and enjoy and celebrate and give thanks to Hashem. We continue doing it. Okay, Dafka, we continue, just like we read the Megillah twice. Le'olam Mordechai will always give you praise, not just on Purim itself, but beyond Purim. That's one aspect. The second aspect of Purim is the day of petition, of prayer. Not of sorrow, but it's a day of vulnerability. It's a day which should lead us to humility, awareness that life shifts, things happen. Things are out of our control, and that needs to help us. We need to use that. We need to channel that life experience to turn to Hashem in moments of crisis. Okay, and that's captured in the first pasuk. As we saw in the first pasuk, right? We saw Hashem Elokai Ekra v'lo ta'aneh v'layla v'lo dumi ami. Now, final piece, and with this we'll conclude. Rav Soloveitchik, we're not going to go through this whole piece now, but he has a piece in a work of his called Worship of the Heart, which was published posthumously. And he's an explanation of the machlok between the Rambam and the Ramban Nachmanides about the nature of tefillah. And the Rambam says, the Rav Soloveitchik makes the case that the reason why a Jew prays is because he is in tzara, he is in pain, he's in distress. But there are two different types of distress. The Ramban argues, when it's a mitzvah to daven, literally when there's a crisis, when there's a famine, when there's a war, when there's illness, when there's food shortages, when things are bad, someone's sick, that is an impetus to daven. He calls this a surface crisis. However, there's another type of crisis that the Rav Soloveitchik talks about, and that's called a depth crisis. And a depth crisis is not spurred on by any particular event. It's not that something tragic happened in the world. A depth crisis is when a person becomes aware of how vulnerable life is, how vulnerable they are, how easily things can shift, how tenuous life is, how fragile life is. And that no matter what successes we have in the world, we get shot down ultimately. And we end up being defeated, is a term that he uses. We can never truly control our environment. We can never truly control our destiny. Ultimately, everybody has to succumb. That's just the way of the world. And this is a recognition of our mortality, a recognition that this is the way of the world is a good thing. And Rav Soloveitchik wants us to embrace the depth crisis. When it comes to crises in the world, we have to act. We have to be active. We have to fight them. We have to build hospitals, and we have to send supplies and maybe send F-16s too. Okay, that's a whole other discussion. And we have to fight, bad events that happen in the world. That's when it comes to what we call the surface crisis. But the depth crisis, Rav Soloveitchik says, is not something you push away. A person should have a depth crisis in life. A person should be aware of their vulnerability. It should lead them to more humility. They should be more aware that life is short and that life is fragile. That's a good thing that we need to confront and embrace and make a part of our daily lives. So what Purim is an opportunity to embrace both thanksgiving as well as crisis in our lives, and to make that a part of our daily avodat Hashem, to recognize these two aspects of reality and to take them with us beyond Purim, because Purim shelo yivatel le'olam, it is never nullified. It's a chag that will continue even in the times of Mashiach. And so this notion of crisis, religious crisis, crisis of faith, these are good things, because it means that we are more awake to reality. We are more awake to a deeper level of living. We're not living just a superficial existence. We're living a deeper existence. And that's what it means to have a depth crisis. And that's what Ta'anit Esther is ultimately. So with this, we're going to conclude. My bracha to all of us is that we should have a full Purim experience. It should be an experience on the one end of petitioning, of Ta'anit Esther, of recognition of our vulnerability. This is a good thing. It's a good thing to have that experience. We shouldn't run away from it. But it should also be a day of wonderful thanksgiving and feasting and celebration. And we need to take these two things together. This is captured in the two readings of the Megillah. One of them that's sort of more connected to Ta'anit Esther, it's at night. The other one that's during the day. We should take both of these with us, and please God, Purim should give us a model for how we should live a meaningful life, a life filled with celebration, and also I'm going to say this, a sense of depth crisis, which means that we're living on a deeper level in a more meaningful way. So, Purim Sameach L'Kulam, and Shkoach Halalech.
Thank you.